Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. Remember, it's Friday, and that means new supporters of the National Pulse get a shout-out on the show later today. You can be one of them by signing up at thenationalpulse.com/support. Today we're talking about the stakes of this election. Our guest is former National Security Council Deputy Assistant to the President of the United States, Michael Anton. Michael's also the author of the extremely important essay you might remember from 2016 entitled The Flight 93 Election. He said, writing under a pseudonym on September 5th, 2016, quote, 2016 is the Flight 93 election. Charge the cockpit or you die. You may die anyway. You or the leader of your party may make it into the cockpit and not know how to fly or land the plane. There are no guarantees except one. If you don't try, death is certain. To compound the metaphor, a Hillary Clinton presidency is Russian roulette with a semi-auto. With Trump, at least you can spin the cylinder and take your chances, end quote. Well, no doubt 2020 is another Flight 93 election, and it's clear the establishment realizes it too. Michael Anton has written a new book. It's called The Stakes, and it lays out pretty much what the stakes of this election are. We'll ask him today if they're higher, lower, or just about the same as last time around, and I have my own opinions on that too. But certainly for the neoliberal political elite, they're higher. This election, they know, is a referendum on 4 years of President Trump, 4 years of record growth, 4 years of no new wars, 4 years of swamp draining, and 4 years of America first. But it's also been 4 years of Russiagate hoaxes, 4 years of spying and setup and lying and fraud, 4 years of fake news, and 4 years of doing everything in their power to bring America to its knees under Trump, including and not limited to the pandemic and their prescriptions for how to deal with the Chinese Communist Party's virus. So we knew they'd try to cheat again, but we just didn't know how until recently. President Trump zeroed in on this topic last night at his rally in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. Let's hear from the president from last night.
Now they want to send out 80 million unsolicited. I like it much better. They used to say universal. They used to say live ballots. I like the word unsolicited and solicited. Solicited's okay, because that's when you're asking and you want it, then you send in the necessary paperwork and documentation and you get the ballot and you fill it out. That's okay. But you can't, this whole thing with the unsolicited. Unsolicited means you're sitting there. You know, we have a big enthusiasm edge. But when they throw these things in your face, and the lists are inaccurate, and people are dead, and dogs have gotten ballots, they have. Dogs have gotten ballots. And they know I'm right, and everybody knows I'm right, and they say I'm right behind the closed doors, and it's a disgrace what they do to our country. 80 million unsolicited ballots, people that had no idea. People that weren't going to vote, in all fairness. It's really unfair because our people have enthusiasm. They're going out to vote. They're all going out to vote. Everybody here going to vote? Everybody? But they have no enthusiasm. I said, so that's unfair then. Guy walks and then he'll have somebody knock on the door, say, listen, would like your ballot. I don't want to vote. I don't care about Biden. I'm a Democrat. I don't care about this guy. Well, look, where is it? Here, take it. Blah, blah, blah. They even have a provision where you don't have to verify signatures. What is going on? And they have another provision in some states where you can harvest. That's where you grab them all together and drop them. And in Nevada, they actually have a provision where they don't have to be counted till 7 days after the election. So that means if we have a close election, could be close. I hope it's not. I hope we have a landslide like you've never seen. But if we have a close election, that means Nevada has the right to, and I love Nevada, I think we're going to win Nevada, except where they're sending all these hundreds of thousands, millions of unsolicited ballots to people in Nevada and people that probably left alone.
Well, President Trump knows the stakes, and he's taking great efforts to avert the big cheat taking place before our eyes. At 6:18 p.m. Eastern Time last night, the president posted this tweet to his 86 million followers. The website is armyfortrump.com, and when you go to the site, it asks you to be an election day volunteer for the Trump campaign. In other words, they know the Democrats intend to try to defraud the ballot in November. It's banana republic politics, something you might see in a country like Pakistan, but not in America until now. The great push for mail-in ballots has been predicated on safety. But at the time, we're being told, okay, you can go to AMC theaters again, you can spend money at Walmart again, and if you're the Speaker of the House of Representatives, you can go get a blowout at the salon again, but you can't vote. Don't vote. That would be madness. Instead, hand your ballot over to some party worker or pop it in the mail. Nothing will go wrong, right? No, not right. There's plenty of evidence, not just from the United States, but from around the world, that shows how easy postal or mail-in ballots are to defraud. Why is America moving backward in its democracy? What I'm about to read you is from a British member of Parliament from 2019. Steve Baker wrote in an article entitled, "There is widespread abuse of postal votes. This simply cannot go on." He said, quote, "There is widespread abuse of postal votes. In one case, private data held by a third party for legitimate purposes was used to apply for postal votes and then intercepted before electors had the chance to complete them. The victims would not make a formal complaint as they feared retribution." He says, quote, "I have received accounts of candidates visiting electors' homes, demanding postal votes are completed in front of them, and then taking them away. I have testimony of one young woman's unmarked postal vote being taken off her under duress by a relative and handed to a candidate. We learned about it because she wanted to cancel her postal vote so she could cast it again herself." End quote. There's a reason we believe in the sanctity of the vote and why the Chartists of 1838 demanded a secret ballot. It's because people are corrupt. Voting in the mid-19th century was done in public by a show of hands at the hustings. A landlord or an employer could see how their tenant or employee was voting and influence or intimidate them. The introduction of a secret ballot allowed voters to make confidential choices, and this prevented intimidation and bribery. But the left doesn't like that. They like to coerce across the board. And when they can't coerce, they like to steal. Trump gets this. Let's listen to what else he said last night.
But think of it. They have 7 days after the election. Did you know that, Mike? 7 days. What does that mean? I want to see the results of the election on November 3rd. Right? And by the way, if it's anything like these other events, it could go on forever. I mean, the congressional race, which they just gave up and they declared her a winner, which they should not have done. They should make that do-over. And I think in Patterson they have a do-over. I think they're going to do it over because it was just ripe with fraud, theft. People were selling ballots. People were selling ballots. And you know, they talk about Russia. They're so worried about Russia. What about sending out 80 million ballots? That's your...
Selling ballots. Why are we going back to pre-Chartist days? Why is America moving to a system that can't and won't ensure the sanctity of the vote? And what does it pretend if the left wins on November the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th or beyond? Our guest today is Michael Anton, author of The Stakes, America at the Point of No Return. And we'll be talking to him about his analysis of this coming election right after the break. This is The National Pulse, and we'll be right back. Well, welcome back to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, and our guest today is Michael Anton. He's the author of a new book, The Stakes, senior fellow at the Claremont Institute and former deputy national security advisor for the President of the United States. Michael, thank you so much for joining us here on the National Pulse today.
Thank you for having me. I just want to mention my main employer is also Hillsdale College in Washington, so they always want me to make sure I get that out there, and it's a wonderful institution, so I'm honored to work there.
My apologies. We are indeed big fans of Hillsdale College, and what a wonderful institution it is. We're so glad that you could join us, and so glad that you are with all these august institutions, be it Claremont, Hillsdale, and that you serve the President of the United States. But I'm going to ask you a question that you always get asked, but with a little bit of a change here. For the audience that doesn't know, I mean, you really became super famous once you came out as the author of the Flight 93 election. But just remind us, what was the Flight 93 election? Why did you write this essay?
It was an article that posted on the Claremont Review of Books website almost exactly 4 years ago. I believe the date was September 6th, but I know it was Monday, Labor Day, 2016. And it was an article that really took to task mostly the conservative movement and Republican politicians for being so anti-Trump, for not seeing what the stakes of the 2016 election were, but also for not seeing that it wasn't, yes, I made a negative case for Trump, that in the binary choice, you have to side with Trump over Hillary because the Hillary Clinton administration will be a disaster for us. But I made a positive case for Trump as well. And I said the conservatives don't realize that Trump's positions on immigration, trade, and war are both superior to their positions and more conservative and more fit for the times than 2016. So the piece posted, a couple days went by. I got a few notes from friends of mine who either knew it was me or figured it was me. And then 2 days later, on Wednesday, September 8th, I hope I have the date right, but it was a Wednesday, that's for sure, Rush Limbaugh started reading it on the air. And then, my wife alerted me to that, and I thought, all right, that's interesting. Maybe he'll read 10 minutes, a couple of sentences. He gave the whole 3-hour show over to it on that day. He read the entire essay, interspersed with his own commentary over to it, and has referred back to it many times since. And that's when it blew up. When Rush read it on the air, the Claremont website crashed. My friends, Julie Ponzi and Ben Boychuk, my old friends from Claremont back in the 90s when we were all in grad school together, had just started American Greatness at that time, which is now, a huge success and big and gets tons of traffic, but it was brand new then. So we posted the essay. They knew it was me. I gave it to them, and they posted it on American Greatness, and it crashed because there was so much interest because of Rush Limbaugh. So wow. For about 6 hours that day, lots of people were talking about it, but you couldn't read it because, and then eventually they got the websites back up again. And it just had this tremendous half-life where 4 years later, people still talk about it. Limbaugh himself, if I am not mistaken, has mentioned the Flight 93 election 3 times this year. So people still talk. I figure, I never thought that this would happen. Certainly when I wrote it, I didn't think much. I just thought, I have my thing to say, I'll say it, and it'll go the way most articles go. But this one took off in a way that I certainly never expected.
So what was the general thesis behind this? We've got about 2 minutes left here before we break, because I went a bit over with my lengthy monologue, as I often do. We've got about 2 minutes here, but then we have 2 segments of 8. So I just want to get this in the last 90 seconds of this segment here. What was the thesis behind this thing? I mean, what caused you to write it as well within yourself?
That the thesis was that demographically, the Democrats had been crowing about this for a long time, that soon they will have a permanent Democratic majority because of demographic change. So they'll have a blue state electoral lock. And I thought, if Hillary Clinton wins this election in 2016, she will almost certainly be reelected in 2020 because no president has lost a bid for reelection since 1992 in a very unusual race. And what we will have is blue state politics from coast to coast, basically forever. And that would be a disaster. I am a native Californian. I saw what blue state one-party politics did to California. It's how I begin the book, by the way. I think it's been a disaster. I've also lived in New York. I've seen what blue state one-party politics has done to New York. That would be a disaster. So that's the negative case. And then, as I said, I tried to make a positive case for Trump. I said, he's right on immigration. We've got to get this under control. We need a wall. He's right on trade. We've been too open trade, giving away our manufacturing sector to other countries for too long. And he's right on war. What are we doing? We fight endlessly for seemingly no purpose. And worst of all, we don't even win. So on all 3 of these issues, the Republican establishment was against him, and he was right, and they were wrong. And I found it offensive that they kept all the people who had gotten these things wrong and run the country in a way into a ditch. We're calling him a buffoon.
Michael, I will stick around because in the next segment I want to get into this latest essay that's on American greatness, excerpts of your book. It's also at the American Mind. We'll link to it on the National Pulse also. But stick around. We'll get back to Michael Anton. This is the National Pulse. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back. We're so grateful for all of you watching out there, whether it's online, whether it's on the Pluto app, whether it's on Dish, or anywhere else you're watching the National Pulse. Here, we've only been going with this show about 2.5 weeks, and we're getting rave reviews, and the viewership is going up and up and up, and we're really grateful for all you guys out there sharing it, tweeting it, Facebooking it, parlaying it, and so forth. Our guest today is Michael Anton. He's got a great new book out. It's called The Stakes. And I want you all to go out there and get it. It's available on Amazon and in all good booksellers. Michael, thank you so much for being here with us. I want to dive into this essay of yours that appeared on American Greatness. It's also at the American Mind. And I understand that some parts of it, you've excerpted from the book. Makes so many great points in such a short space of time here. But I want to get into one of the early statements you make. You say the experience of Trump's first term reveals how weak the presidency really is, not just constitutionally and historically, but above all, currently. A lot of people will balk at the idea of that. How do you come to that conclusion?
Well, the presidency is intended in a way to be weak by the founders. They didn't they wanted a separation of powers because they feared that too much concentration of power in any one office would lead to tyranny. So the presidency is limited. It has these enumerated powers. And that's built in by design. But in addition to all of that, today what we have is a mass accumulation of power in our society in other governmental sectors, the unaccountable and bureaucracy or administrative state, first and foremost, and also in corporations, in universities, in foundations, in the media, in all of these sectors outside of government. And all of them, literally all of them, are diametrically opposed to President Trump and what he's trying to do. So I said that to sort of help people I hear sometimes from people that, well, I voted for Trump and I expected X and Y and Z and I haven't gotten all of it yet. And therefore, what's the point? The point is you would have gotten the opposite had you not elected him. You got some of what you wanted and you need to keep him there so that you can get more of what you want. And it's going to be an extremely hard slog because he's opposed by every other power center in the country, including his own government that nominally reports to him. It's very hard for the president to give an order to the federal bureaucracy and have that order followed. It's extremely difficult because of the way our unaccountable administrative state has set up and grown tentacles over the last 100 years.
Yeah, you wrote that you vastly underestimated how bad the resistance to Trump would be, but this isn't your first rodeo. You've worked in a previous administration. What are the differences, the tangible differences that you saw?
I was in the first George W. Bush administration in his first term, and in a little bit into his second. And I saw the administrative state, the deep state, whatever you want to call him. I saw them undermine him from the inside in various ways. And even though really there was a core agreement on broad goals between he and they. So I knew coming in that it would be much harder on Trump because he ran against the entire bipartisan ruling class consensus on pretty much everything. And so the bureaucracy that always wants to get its way was now going to be even more truculent and difficult. I knew that. And yet there were still things that I found impossible to imagine that it took a long time to sink in. I mean, that the FBI and the intelligence community and senior members of the previous administration would make up a phony Russia spy story and we would consume 2 years of our national life over a complete lie. If you had told me that at the beginning, I would have said, that sounds like a great John le Carré novel where, what's the title? I'd like to read it at the beach or something. And I certainly never, the impeachment sham, the third time impeachment has been used in American history they couldn't even define what it was, but I think it was he was 5 weeks late delivering some kind of aid to Ukraine, and we're impeaching him over that. And the way that whole thing was set up, the way it was clearly an op from inside the bureaucracy to give the Democrats the means to impeach him. I never would have imagined something like that could possibly happen. And then we saw it happen, and now you don't have to imagine it, but it just, I guess I was naive. I don't know how else to put it.
So the same choice is in front of Americans now, right from the beginning of this month, really, when people start receiving their ballots, they can fill out and mail to whoever is on the receiving end of them. And then we know that the Democrats are expecting to receive these days and days and days after November the 3rd in an attempt to overturn what they say themselves could be a landslide victory for President Trump on election night. I want to ask you, you've written here, the ruling class will get right back to elevating the international over the national if there's a Joe Biden victory in November. What does that look like for average, everyday Americans, people watching this show and thinking, well, you know, will it be that much different?
The story the Democrats are selling is we're going to go back to the status quo ante. So we're going to take you back to 2015, pre-Trump. The Great Recession is mostly over, and things are fine, sort of from our perspective. Well, in 2015, things were not fine, and that's why Trump won the election. In 2015, the manufacturing sector had been enduring almost 50-year hollowing out. Stagnant wages since the 1970s. It could go on and on with all the things that were wrong in 2015. I fear if they take us back there, economically, it will mean the end of the middle class. It will mean the further consolidation of oligarchic power in big tech and big finance and top corporations, and the destruction almost of communities that in the middle of the country that don't have big tech centers or finance economy, that have old economy, will go away or just shrink to the point further beyond what they are now. And then I'm very worried about the direction the left has taken in the last year, the censorship of social media, the intensity of the propaganda, the wokeness, the religious fervor that insists, in Washington now, I've only seen the videos. Thankfully, this hasn't happened to me personally or to anyone I know, but people go around with bullhorns. And so the restaurants are forced to be closed. The only way they can open is if you sit outside and eat because of the ridiculous lockdowns that I think we all know, or at least I'm now convinced, are completely pointless and counterproductive. So you have to sit outside. And then when you sit outside because of the stupid lockdown that's threatening the business and harming the economy in other ways, then somebody comes up with a bullhorn and shouts in your face as you try to eat your meal and demands that you make some sign of obeisance to their crazed ideology. I think we're going to see lots and lots more of that, and it'll be hard to hide from it and impossible to dissent from it. Cancel culture, which people say is about, or try to downplay, either deny or say it isn't that bad, it strikes me as something fundamentally evil to deprive a person of the ability to make a living, right? Which is the only way you can stay alive and eat. Right. So we're going to say you said something on Twitter once that we don't like. We're going to get you fired, and then we're going to make you unemployable. How are these people supposed to earn livings? And I mean, is this I don't think any of this is thought through, but you wonder if it were thought through, is that just a path toward the guaranteed basic income? We make it impossible for anyone to get a job and then stay alive with a government handout?
Michael, we have to break, but just stick around. Want to get to that. Want to get to immigration as well. Stick around, National Pulse. We'll be right back. Well, Michael Anton is a senior fellow at the Claremont Institute, a lecturer and research fellow at Hillsdale College, a former national security official in the Trump administration. His new book, The Stakes: America at the Point of No Return, is available now. Make sure you go out and get that book. We're talking to Michael Anton, and just want to pick up on the point that Michael made before we went to break. The unpersoning of dissenters will mimic what the government of China does through its social credit system. These are the stakes as we're laying out if Joe Biden and the radical left wins this election. Michael, is that a bit hysterical? Are we really going to have a social credit system like the Chinese Communist Party?
I think we already do. It's just outsourced to the private sector. The private sector does it. And then everyone, when anyone complains about it, people say, oh, well, they're private companies. They can do what they want. Start your own platform, build your own economy, build your own internet. But as I said, when they start locking people out of jobs, out of the ability to make a living, that to me is really sinister. It's almost like a sort of free floating, something that's described out of Solzhenitsyn, gulag, where you're not actually in a camp, but you're otherwise, unpersoned. You just cut off from everything, and people can't live that way. I don't know where the woke left thinks this is supposed to end, but what happens to a person who gets deplatformed, unpersoned, unbanked, and made unemployable for life, let's say at age 30, and your average life expectancy is 80, whatever it is right now? What are they supposed to do for the next 50 years? Have you thought that through, or is the idea that these people should just sort of wither and die? I wonder. I don't know. But the crazy things that I'm hearing and seeing done these days don't lead me to believe that they have a happy answer to that question.
Yeah, where are all these great left-wing thinkers that we're constantly told exist out there on issues like that, and where they might go? We had Dr. Matthew Peterson on the show yesterday talking about how, the Jeff Bezoses of the world may like to support these people now, but what happens if you keep feeding the crocodile? Eventually it's going to come for you. I want to ask you as well on the implications, the stakes for immigration into the United States. You write in this article, Biden has already promised to amnesty every illegal immigrant currently in the country, according to a 2018 Yale study. That's at least 22 million people. And you write, if each newly minted American brings just one relative, that's another 20 million new immigrants in Biden's first term alone. But we know from the White House figures themselves, Michael, that the average is about 3.5 family members for every migrant in chain migration terms. That would lead to a 25% increase in the population under Biden's first term.
Yes, I mean, it could happen. I was tried to be conservative in my estimate and just say if only one. But, the number that has been used forever for the number of illegal literally for 20 years, the public estimate has been there's about 11 million people, illegal immigrants in the country right now. And I thought, that's interesting. We've had porous borders for all these years, and every year it's always 11 million. How come it never goes up? And finally, some researchers put out a study in late 2018 and said, we think it's twice that, right? Twice that. Okay. Biden won't admit that it's 22 million because it sounds too scary, but he has said he'll amnesty them all. Not only will he amnesty them all, but remember, every single candidate, when asked that question at the first Democratic debate, I think it was the first debate, will you make illegal immigrants also eligible for Medicaid? Every single hand went up in the air. We're not going to amnesty everyone. We're going to essentially so strain one of our social safety nets that's already under tremendous strain because the finances of this country are so bad, right? But I don't see how the program itself or even the federal budget could survive a fiscal strain of that magnitude instantly. But they're pledged to do it. I see no signs, the only hope really, some people say, well, now it's campaign rhetoric. They talk like this. They'll get in there and they'll be more moderate. I don't know. I doubt it. They don't seem to be in the mood for moderation or concessions or compromise at the moment.
All right. They seem to be in the mood for street violence and White House sieges and unpersoning and murdering people in the street and all the rest of it. Michael, just before we let you go, we've got about 3 minutes here. You have a subheading of this article, and I commend this article to the audience, called A Tyranny Perpetual and Universal. As the audience knows, I like to mark up everything and go through it and annotate it and highlight it and go through everything, and I have, and it's wonderful, and it leads them onto your book, which is equally wonderful. It says Goodbye Constitution, this subheading, Goodbye Constitution. And I got to tell you, this really resonated with me because the latest plan that we've seen from the Transition Integrity Project, this Soros and Berggruen Institute-backed organization, they say that the Democrats should urge an end to the Electoral College, should put term limits on Supreme Court justices, and they give more and more prescriptions for this. So just tell us a little bit, just before we let you go, about the Goodbye Constitution part of this.
The Democrats and the left generally have been irritated by and hostile to constitutional limits for 125 years. This goes all the way back to the original capital P progressive era, when they were saying in the beginning of the late 19th century, it's these restraints that the founders built into the government that are holding back progress. And if we could override or get around the restraints or get rid of, there's no limit to the kinds of things we could do. And the left has been in that sort of mood, except on the rare occasions when a constitutional limit serves their immediate need. They've been in that mood for a long time. They're talking openly about it now in a way, though, that I've never heard. The Electoral College, yes, they've been there have been several attempts over the years to get rid of the Electoral College. Since I'm mentioning it, one of my former colleagues who died fairly recently, Michael Ullman, saved the Electoral College on more than one occasion through his scholarship and deft political advocacy. Essentially, what that would do is to make the country into simple majority rules, tyranny of the majority, and which is exactly what the founders were warned about and were worried about. Together, and we vote, and whatever the vote says happens. There's no check, there's no breaks. Very, very scary prospect. But I also think, as I say in the book, we haven't really been ruled as a country constitutionally the way the parchment, as I call it, the paper, has designed, the way it says, in a very long time. And I think we could conceivably get it back if we play all of our cards right and Trump is reelected and a lot of other things happen. Right. But if we don't, if Trump is defeated and or if he wins, they're doing something I've never seen the Democrats and the left do ever, which is they're openly talking about muddying the waters. Now they say if Trump will lose and he'll refuse to leave. Yeah.
Michael, we'd love to keep you on if you want to just conclude that point after this next break.
Okay, sure.
Okay, great. We're going to break. We'll come back, Michael Anton Fisher, and then we swear we'll let you get on with your day. But the book is The Stakes. You've got 2 minutes in the break now. Go and get it. It's called The Stakes. It's by Michael Anton, and we'll be back in just a second. Well, I can't take all the credit for thinking up Michael Anton as a guest today. It was Natalie Winters, in fact, because I said, who's got a great book out right now for our Friday episode? And she just burst out, Michael Anton. So there you go, Michael. You got a fan in here in studio in the form of Natalie Winters as well. Michael, you were just finishing a point there, and we had to go to break, but I want to give you the opportunity to finish it. Take us away.
The Democrats essentially lately, if you connect all the dots, and several new dots dropped today. Bill Clinton is saying that he expects Donald Trump will lose and refuse to leave. And just yesterday, I think the Washington Post had a long article saying all of these outcomes will lead to street violence and Donald Trump may have to be forcibly removed from the White House. Now, the premise that they're saying is that Trump will lose and refuse to concede. I actually think that's a lie. That will not happen. If Trump genuinely loses, I have every expectation that he will do what he's constitutionally required to do and step down and leave on January 20th of next year. What I fear and what it looks like is they're getting ready to muddy the waters enough that whatever the outcome is, the media and its propaganda, the left and all of the media, all of social media will say, Trump lost. He lost, and he's still there. Therefore, we're justified in doing anything to pull him out of there. Joe Biden himself has said at least twice, I think 3 times, if that happens, the military is going to be ready to go in there and drag him out of there at gunpoint. This is crazy talk of the likes that has never, ever happened in the United States of America before, and it should scare the living daylights out of everyone. And I hope it scares the living daylights out of the White House, and they're thinking about how they're going to respond and what they're going to do.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Michael. We've been sounding the alarm on this since August the 3rd when the Transition Integrity Project report came out, and we put the whole report annotated by myself on the National Pulse website today so people can go and look and see where we're pointing out certain things. The heads of these organizations, of course, these same organizations that are making the charges that the media is following up on, as you mentioned, Michael, are donors. They're donors to the Biden campaign. We're going to get into that in the next couple of segments here with Natalie Winters. But Michael Anton, I just wanted to say thank you again. Make sure you get the book, The Stakes, America at the Point of No Return. Make sure you're signed up at the Claremont Institute and the Hillsdale College. They blast out all of Michael's work because Michael's old school. He doesn't do Twitter or Parler or anything like this. So you've got to get to Michael through the institutions. Michael, thank you once again.
Thank you.
All right, Natalie, you heard it from Michael Anton right there. It was your idea, a great idea to have Michael Anton on the show, and he just confirmed a lot of our reporting about, and my concern is the very same. Is the White House taking it seriously enough? In the introduction, in the monologue, I showed how President Trump was taking the mail-in ballot thing seriously, and it's the mail-in ballot thing that they're going to rely on, that they're going to lean on to make these claims that he's not the legitimate president. Again, in Hawkfish's words, this DNC analytics firm, not on election day, but in the days after election day, they're going to come, we found another 50,000 ballots here, and there was another 20,000 buried under my blanket. blanket, and they'll come up with all of this, and they'll say, you, Mr. Trump, are not the rightfully elected president of the United States. So it just strikes me as utterly extraordinary that we're in this position. As Michael said, there's nothing like this has ever happened before in the Republic's history. And there are so many of these things as well that we keep seeing popping up here and there. We have a story up on the site right now about Rosa Brooks. Rosa Brooks is the person behind the Transition Integrity Project, her and Niels Gilman. But just to reiterate from yesterday, Rosa Brooks is not nonpartisan, as all the newspapers are calling her.
No, she's donated over the course of her lifetime over $20,000 exclusively to Democratic candidates, including over $5,100 to Joe Biden, dating all the way back to September, months before the Transition Integrity Project was even launched.
Hold on, how has Rosa Brooks made a living in her life?
Well, she's jumped around. Right now she's at Georgetown Law, but she used to serve as general counsel to the Open Society Institute, specifically George Soros, which now she currently sits on the foundation's board. And
New America Foundation and all of these others. So let me get this straight. Soros pays her, Georgetown pays her, and she cuts checks to Biden.
And somewhere in there, she's at George Soros is having private dinners with advisors to both the Biden campaign and the Obama White House.
And offering substantive help. It wasn't, hey, what can I do for you? You know, buy you a drink, take you out sometime. She offered substantive help in that email that you dug out from, what, 2015?
Yes.
Extraordinary stuff. So tell us about her co-founder of the Transition Integrity Project, Niels Gilman.
Sure. So as Michael was talking about during his amazing interview, the media is going to play a very integral role in the outcome of the election in the following days. So it's really concerning when you look at Niels Gilman's track record, his history of where he's worked on two fronts. I would say both domestic interference in the election and foreign interference in the election, specifically through the Berggruen Institute, which we've covered has extensive links to the Chinese Communist Party. But he currently serves as the deputy editor to Noema magazine, which is run by the Berggruen Institute. Now, this magazine was formed out of a collaboration, what was known as the World Post, which was a collaboration between the Washington Post, a noted anti-Trump outlet, and the Berggruen Institute. So it morphed into this, but a lot of people who were involved in that project carried over. So when you look at the editor-in-chief, the managing editors, a lot of the leadership, their resumes are exclusively New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, all these outlets that we know are anti-Trump.
Extraordinary. More. Keep going.
Sure, and it's even more interesting when you take this in context of what he told Vox yesterday, which you highlighted. Quote, I think the media in some ways has the most important role of all. If there's a contested result, the only way that either Trump or Biden, for that matter, can effectively contest a result that goes against them is if they create a plausible narrative that is backed up by their media factions. Well, the media factions are entirely on Biden's side, on Niels Gilman's side, and what's really concerning is the fact that the editorial board of this magazine has deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party in the form of Fareed Zakaria, in the form of actually the director of the Berggruen Institute's China Initiative, which has hosted annual conferences with leader Xi Jinping, and this individual has even made calls for China to play an increased role in global affairs. The list goes on. It's very concerning stuff. Even the editor-in-chief has penned countless op-eds talking about how the United States should follow China, take cues from them on leadership, and that China needs to follow the words of Henry Kissinger and, quote, start leading.
Wow, Natalie Winters with some bombshells there. We'll be coming back after this next break with more from Lead Stories. Remember them? Michael Anton talked about unpersoning. Well, Lead Stories unpersons the National Pulse all the time, hiding our articles on Facebook, and we've dinged them around a couple of times for it, but now they're taking down articles about pedophilia. Why would the left be doing that? The National Pulse, Natalie Winters will tell you right after this break. Well, welcome back to the National Pulse on this Labor Day weekend eve, I suppose. I want to get now to something that really means a lot to me, and that's our supporters, you guys out there who like our work and see fit to support us. It's not a lot. It's $10 to fund Real News. Fundrealnews.com is the URL you can go to, or thenationalpulse.com/support. And so many of you have, especially in the last 7 days, especially since President Trump tweeted our story out the other day. So I'm really grateful. I'm going to read some of the names out here, but I want to put the rest on screen if America's Voice can as well. Thank you. Kirk T. and Virginia R. and Rita R. and Thomas S. and Charlotte G. and Gail L. and BJZ and Douglas G. and Russell W. and the list is going on your screen there, as you can see. We don't want to put the full names of everyone because we don't want people to get doxxed or unpersoned, but we do want to say a very special thank you to our supporters out there, because without you, honestly, the investigations that we do, the work that we do, the stories that we publish, that the President of the United States sees fit to tweet, well, they wouldn't be possible without all of you. So I'm really, really grateful to all the great patriots out there across the world. We get support from across the world from all of these people, so we're just so utterly grateful for your support, as you see your names on the screen there, and we're very, very, again, grateful for it. Natalie, very quickly, lead stories. Alan Duke, Belgian-based company which censors news here in the United States and impacts the election. What have they been up to lately? On both Facebook and TikTok, well, they seem to be defending what is a very controversial bill newly passed in California, being sent to Governor Newsom's desk, but that would effectively decriminalize, or at least lessen the penalties of essentially pedophilia, to call it what it is. Interestingly enough, Lead Stories felt compelled to issue nearly 1,000-word article against a post that was calling California out for passing this bill. Interestingly enough, they quote both the state rep who drafted the bill, and I believe 2 to 3 different other pro-LGBTQ advocacy organizations who are in some sense in support of the bill, giving long descriptions as to why they support it, but you hear no really rebuttal from the other side as to what is this bill? What does it do? Essentially, anyone who's aged 14 to 17, if they engage in sexual relations with someone who is within a 10-year age gap of them, it is not considered statutory rape. So a 24-year-old can have a form of sex with a 14-year-old, and the judge isn't supposed to put them on the sex offenders register? Yes, it would be up to the judge as opposed to a universal, you are on the sex offender list decision. And Lead Stories is going after a random Facebook user who brought attention to that bill. I wonder what Lead Stories and Alan Duke have to do in common with the people that are in favor of that. It's utterly bizarre and disgusting, quite frankly. Another disgusting thing that I saw right before we came to air today came out of this Joe Biden event. I think it was in Wilmington, in Delaware today. Of course, the Atlantic magazine, which is owned by a leftist who gives money and support to Joe Biden and Democrats. Well, the Atlantic has been publishing all sorts of fake news recently, a really dreadful magazine. A really great shame as well that a magazine that actually used to publish things once upon a time that were at least readable is doing this. Well, the Atlantic's own reporter, I won't call him a reporter, the Atlantic's own propagandist was in person to ask Joe Biden about their own story. Let's play the clip. Let's hear what he had to say.
Thank you, sir. This morning, in reference to that article in The Atlantic, in a call convened by your campaign, Khizr Khan said that the comments demonstrated that President Trump's life is a testament to selfishness, and that his soul is that of a coward. You've talked about this as a different view of how you see the job as president, but when you hear these remarks, suckers, losers, recoiling from amputees, what does it tell you about President Trump's soul and the life he leads?
I'm going to try to be measured in my response. If it's true, and based on other things he said, I believe the article is true, I'd ask you all the rhetorical question. How do you feel? How would you feel if you had a kid in Afghanistan right now? How would you feel if you lost a son, daughter, husband, wife? How would you feel, for real? I know that's not your job to express that feeling, but you know. You know in your heart, you know in your gut.
We know exactly. We know exactly.
It's deplorable.
We know exactly, Joe Biden, that you were the one with your administration and your decades in the swamp here in Washington, D.C., that was sending American troops into the line of fire for what? For what? And for how many decades? Don't pull that on us. Don't pull the emotional heartstrings. Don't pull the pathos out again. Oh, we know, because it's the ordinary people, the deplorables of this country, that have to shoulder the burden of the foreign wars that you sent people to, that you sent people to die for. For what? Oh, so that Hunter Biden could make some money? That Hunter Biden could make some money in China or Ukraine or the Middle East or wherever else it was? And the Atlantic magazine. I mean, that guy couldn't even spit his question out. He was so palpably embarrassed to be told by his editor to be there. You got to go and look at it right now. I'm looking at his name. His name is Edward Isaac Dovere. On Twitter, he is just spending his whole afternoon now defending himself on Twitter against people who are calling him ridiculous as a result of this. Was he auditioning? Was he auditioning to be Joe Biden's next press secretary? Because it sure sounded like it. I mean, imagine writing a fake news story with fake sources, anonymous, that has been refuted by people in the White House, by people in the administration, even by people who are hostile to the president, who've refuted this fake Atlantic story. Imagine writing that and then going to the opponent's campaign event and saying, oh, Mr. Biden, what do you think the president has in his soul? Oh, it's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. That's Der Stürmer level propaganda. Embarrassing. Oh, well. Well, the National Pulse will be back live next Tuesday here at 3 p.m. Make sure you're tuning in Monday for the best of Nigel Farage and Jack Brewer. I want to say a big thank you to our production team, America's Voice. Stick around for more America's Voice content over the course of the day. Thanks to Natalie Winters and all the rest of the team. We'll see you next Tuesday.